Maurice Jenkins felt his heart pound as the old school bus rattled into the town square. He had not set foot here since he left for basic training years ago. The morning air smelled of fresh grass and sweet pastries from Mrs. Turner's bakery. Down the street, flags snapped in a gentle breeze, and bright red, white, and blue banners hung from lampposts. Small clusters of people in neat jackets and pressed dresses milled around folding chairs. Some held steaming cups of coffee, others clutched programs printed with flowing script. Everywhere he looked, he saw familiar faces, neighbors who had waved him off at every holiday parade, cousins who had cheered for him at every game. He'd stepped down onto the cracked pavement, smoothing out the sharp creases in his uniform. Even though the cloth felt stiff and cold, he breathed in pride at the sight of his medals shining against his chest. Morris drew a deep breath and let it out slowly. The smell of fresh paint on the courthouse steps reminded him of his last days at home before he shipped out overseas. His chest tightened as memories of children's laughter and late night. Bonfires under the stars mingled with the dull roar of helicopters and the echoing bark of orders on distant bases. He closed, his eyes for a moment brushing a trembling hand over his medals. Off to his left, a small stage stood before the old marble building. A podium waited under a simple arch of balloons. Town officials and veterans stood in neat rows. In the center of the crowd, families sat in folding chairs, their eyes fixed on the stage. Maurice walked a few steps that felt like a mile. Footsteps seemed heavier than the last, as if the weight of his memories pressed down on him. He reminded himself of why he came home, to honor those he had lost and to stand before the people he loved. Even now, a knot of nerves sat in his stomach. He spotted the mayor, a friendly woman who had once taught him in grade school. She waved and smiled as he approached. She handed him a program that showed his name in bold letters: Maurice Jenkins, Army Sergeant, Honored Veteran. His breath caught. A murmur of applause rose as she introduced him to the crowd. He nodded, gave a small wave, and moved toward his place among the other veterans. Men and women in uniforms from different branches of the service stood at attention. Their faces told stories of distant missions and quiet courage under fire. As the ceremony began, a hush fell. The mayor spoke of sacrifice and service, reminded everyone that freedom costs lives, and that each veteran carried invisible scars. Maurice closed his eyes for a moment, letting her words seep into his heart. He felt tears sting at the corners of his eyes. He thought of Marcus, his best friend from boot camp, who never made it home. He felt the loss of so many others whose names he still whispered in the darkness of his nightmares. But as he opened his eyes, he saw a sea of kind faces looking back. People who had cheered for him, prayed for him, and now honored him. The mayor called his name. Morris stepped to the podium with steady shoulders, though his hands trembled slightly. He looked out at the crowd. He saw his mother, her hair streaked. With Gray standing on tiptoe behind his sister, she pressed a hand to her heart, her eyes shining with pride. He saw old Mr. Harris, who had given him extra lessons in math when school got too hard. He saw children clutching flags, their innocent faces full of wonder. Morris swallowed hard, blinking away a tear. He leaned in to speak, but the words stuck in his throat for a moment. He cleared his throat and began. "Thank you all for this. Warm welcome," he said. His voice was steady, calm. "I stand here today, not for myself, but for all those who served alongside me. Some of them are here in this crowd, and some rest beneath white stones far from home." Looking at the veterans beside him, "We answered a call to serve, believing in the ideals of our country. We served with honor and courage. We returned with stories of hardship, but also with hope. Hope that what we did mattered." He felt the crowd soften as he spoke. The warmth of their attention wrapped around him like a familiar blanket. He spoke of unity, of the bonds formed in faraway places under harsh sun and pouring rain. He described how a simple act of kindness, a shared ration of water, or a letter delivered from home could lift spirits when despair threatened to overwhelm. His gaze drifted over the children playing at the edge of the square, imagining them growing into men and women who would someday pick up the torch of service. He asked them to remember that freedom was fragile, and that each of them held a role in protecting it. "Carry kindness with you," he said. "Carry respect. Carry the memory of those who came before us. As he finished, a swell of applause rose. Morris stepped back, saluting the flag one final time. He felt a lightness in his chest, as if a burden had lifted. The ceremony moved on to the reading of names of those lost in recent conflicts. Soft sobs rose from the crowd. Maurice kept his gaze steady, honoring each name as it was read. He felt his own tears fall, but he held them back, offering silent prayers for each fallen hero. The national anthem played, and he stood with his hand over his heart, feeling a fierce pride in the melody that spoke of hope and promise. After the anthem, the mayor invited everyone to gather around the statue of the town's founder for a group photo. Maurice joined hands with the other veterans, their fingers brushing in a quiet show of solidarity. They posed for the camera, standing tall. As the flash went off, Maurice thought of soldiers across the world who would never get such a moment of simple honor back home. He felt their absence like a weight on his soul. When the photo session ended, people moved forward to shake his hand and offer their thanks. Mrs. Turner handed him a fresh apple turnover and said, "You earned this, Sergeant." He smiled, taking a bite of the flaky crust and sweet apple filling. He felt warmth in his belly that had nothing to do with food. He shook hands with children and posed for selfies. Every smile, every word of gratitude felt like a balm for his tired spirit. Just then, Morris noticed a young officer in a crisp uniform standing by the edge of the crowd. He glanced at Morris with a stiff nod. Morris returned the nod politely. The officer's face was serious, almost stern. Maurice wondered who he was. He had not seen this face at the ceremony. He guessed the man was new to town. Maurice didn't know yet that this man's path would cross his in a way no one expected. For now, Maurice took a moment to gaze around. The sun shone brightly, casting long shadows on the square. The sound of laughter mixed with the gentle hum of conversations. He felt hope stirring inside him. He had come home to honor the past, and in this moment he believed in a future where respect and compassion would shape his community. He straightened his shoulders, adjusted his medals, and stepped away from the circle of veterans, ready to greet friends and make new memories on this day of homecoming and hope. Morris walked out of the courthouse square feeling proud and a little tired. The morning sun was warm on his back as he crossed the street to the small cafe on the corner. Through the glass window he saw wooden tables and people chatting softly over their drinks. He paused for a moment, took a deep breath, and stepped inside, ready to enjoy a quiet cup of coffee after the ceremony. The bell above the door jingled as he entered. A few heads turned and some customers offered polite smiles. The barista, a young woman named Lisa, recognized him at once. "Welcome back, Sergeant Jenkins," she said with respect in her voice. Morris nodded, returning her greeting. He removed his cap and settled at a table by the window. The cafe was calm, with soft music playing low in the background and the scent of fresh pastries. Drifting through the air, Morris ordered a black coffee and a slice of apple pie. The rich aroma of the brew filled his senses as he waited. Watched a sparrow hop along the ledge outside, pecking at crumbs. His mind wandered back to the ceremony, how the mayor had spoken of unity, how the children had clutched small flags. He closed his eyes briefly, savoring the peace that followed so many years of noise and danger as he sipped his coffee. The warmth helped to soothe the tightness in his chest. He felt the smooth ceramic cup against his palms and listened to the gentle hum of conversation. A few veterans from the ceremony drifted in to greet him. He stood to shake hands and share quiet words of thanks. Their voices were hushed, respectful. Each handshake felt like a bridge to a moment of shared history and sacrifice. When the veterans left, Morris returned to his table. He lifted his pie, took a small bite, and let the sweet cinnamon flavor spread across his tongue. Outside, branches of a maple tree swayed in the breeze, casting dancing shadows on the sidewalk. For a moment, everything felt simple and right. He allowed himself to smile. This was home, and he was among friends. Then he noticed a patrol car slow down at the corner. The driver sat straight in his seat, peering over a polished dashboard. Maurice looked up curious. The car's engine idled softly. A uniformed officer stepped out, crisp lines on his dark shirt. The officer glanced toward the cafe door and began to walk forward. Maurice watched him approach, wondering if he was lost or curious. The officer reached the door and paused. His jaw was set, lips pressed into a thin line. He carried himself with confident authority and moved with precise steps. Maurice noticed the officer's Bajofficer Connors. He read. The name was unfamiliar. Morris straightened in his seat, sensing something tense in the air. He lifted his eyes to meet the officer's. Without a greeting, Connor said, "Sir, I need to see your ID." The tone was firm, almost sharp. He stepped closer, blocking part of the doorway. Maurice felt his heart quicken. He reached into his jacket, pulled out his wallet, and handed over his driver's license along with his veteran ID card. Morris looked Connors in the eye and said softly, "I just finished speaking at the ceremony, officer." "I'm a veteran," he pointed to his medals pinned neatly on his chest. The medals caught the cafe light and glinted for a moment. Maurice hoped this proof would end the questioning. Connors glanced at the cards and sneered. "Don't lie to me," he said, his voice low and cold. He spoke a hateful insult toward Maurice's race, an angry word that stung like broken glass. Heads turned as the word cut through the quiet cafe. Maurice felt the room tilt, each face frozen in shock. Patrons fell silent. A barista paused mid-pour, coffee dripping from the spout. A mother pressed her child close. One person reached for a phone, fingers trembling. Maurice's hands shook as he gripped the edge of the table. He felt a flush of heat crawl up his neck. The usual hum of the cafe had stopped. Morris rose slowly, placing his coffee cup down with gentle care. He felt the hardness of his metals against his ribs. He steadied his breathing and faced Connors. "Sir," he said, voice low but steady, "I served my country with honor. I earned those medals." Maurice's eyes held both calm and hurt. Connors jutted out his chin and grabbed at Morris's medals, tugging roughly. The metal rattled against the fabric of the uniform. "Prove it or get out," Connors snarled. His grip was tight as he yanked Morris to his feet. A loud gasp rose from the crowd. Morris felt a sudden rush of fear and shame. He held on to his medals, clutching them as if they were fragments of his soul. He looked around, seeing faces filled with shock and sorrow. A few people whispered urgently. One man held up his phone, recording every moment. The cafe owner, Mr. Patel, hurried forward. "Officer, please," he said, voice firm but respectful. "This man is a hero. Let him be." Mr. Patel placed a hand on Morris's shoulder, offering quiet support. Guests shifted in their seats, some standing up to object, but Connors only scowled. He released Maurice's medals, letting them fall back against his coat. "Stand down," he said, and turned away. His boots clicked against the tile floor as he strode back to his car. He gave Morris one last glare before climbing in and slamming the door. Morris sank back into his chair, chest heaving, his hands trembled and tears welled in his eyes. Lisa rushed over with a napkin. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. Other customers murmured apologies. Some offered words of comfort. Morris nodded, his voice caught in his throat. He took a deep breath and reached for his coffee. The warmth of the cup steadied him for a moment. He sipped slowly, then set it down. He realized how much love and respect filled this room despite what had just happened. He looked at the fallen medals on his chest and gently touched each one, as if to remind himself of why he wore them. Those around him gathered closer. A veteran placed a hand on his arm. A teacher who had watched him grow up spoke softly of his courage. Morris felt their support flow into him like a gentle tide. The pain of humiliation started to fade, replaced by a deeper sense of belonging. Yet, as he left the cafe, he carried with him a new weight. He walked back toward the courthouse square, each step echoing in his mind. He pressed his medals to his heart, thinking of home and service and the values he held dear. The video of the officer's cruelty would spread quickly, he knew. With it, the chance for truth and justice. Morris did not feel bitter. He felt determined. He would not let hatred undo the bonds he had worked so hard to build. With a steady stride, he moved forward into the bright afternoon light, ready for whatever came next, and ready to show that dignity and respect could shine brighter than any act of cruelty. Morris left the cafe and walked in silence toward the small park behind the courthouse. The sun was high now, and long shadows of the maple trees stretched across the grass. He found an empty bench under a broad oak and sat down, letting his medals rest against his chest. His heart still pounded from the cafe scene, and each beat felt heavy in his ears. He shut his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them again, he saw sunlight dancing through the leaves. For a moment, he tried to breathe with the rhythm of the light inhale, exhale, shine, shade, but his thoughts raced too fast. He looked down at the medals, cold metal against the fabric of his uniform. Each medal represented a memory of battle, a fallen comrade, a moment of hope among fear. He thought of Marcus, his friend in arms, who had saved his life on a dusty road far from home. Marcus had laughed at jokes that Maurice barely heard over the roar of engines. He had carried Maurice on his back after an explosion rocked their convoy. Marcus had taught him how to share a single canteen of water when the desert sun burned their skin. Morris ran a hand over the medals, as if he could feel Marcus's steady presence in the cool weight. The park was quiet except for the soft murmur of distant traffic and the occasional bird call. Morris rested his head against the bench's wooden slats. He felt the rough grain press into his hair, and he let the tension in his shoulders loosen just a little. A soft breeze rustled the leaves, and he imagined it was a friendly hand brushing across his face. He closed his eyes again and let the breeze carry away a fraction of his pain. A memory came rushing back, unbidden. He remembered the night sky in a desert camp, full of bright stars that seemed too close. He remembered Marcus's voice breaking the silence as he pointed out constellations. They had talked about home, then about baking apple pie, about the smell of rain on hot pavement, about children's laughter in schoolyards. They had talked of simple things to hold on to hope when the world felt broken. In that memory, Maurice heard Marcus's laugh, light and warm. He swallowed and blinked back tears. A sudden chirp from his pocket startled him. He reached inside and pulled out his phone. The screen glowed with a dozen new notifications, messages, alerts, and shares. He tapped the top icon. The video from the cafe had gone viral. He watched himself standing there, chest tight, eyes hard. He saw the officers sneer, the harsh yank at his medals, and the shocked faces of the cafe customers. He saw himself fall back into the chair, tears welling in his eyes. His muscles tensed, and he felt his chest tighten, as if he were back in that moment. He scrolled through the comments. Some people wrote in anger, "This officer should be fired." Others offered apologies and support. "Morris, you are a true hero." A few wrote harsh words about police in general, saw arguments break out, some blaming all officers, some defending the badge. He saw strangers share their own stories of hurt and injustice. He read a comment that said, "Thank you for your service," and another that said, "I can't believe this still happens." His heart ached for people on both sides, those wounded by abuse and those who wore the badge to protect others. Morris put down the phone and stared at the grass. A small acorn lay near his foot. He picked it up and rolled it between his fingers. The shell felt smooth. He remembered how he once held an acorn in his hand as a child, thinking it would grow into a mighty oak. He wondered if his actions, his simple request for respect, could grow into something strong and lasting, something that could give shade to others who felt exposed and alone. He pressed the acorn into the soil under the bench, covering it with his palm. It was a small act, but it felt like planting hope. Then he stood and brushed dust off his uniform. His heart still ached, but he felt a gentle stir of resolve. He walked slowly toward the courthouse steps, each step steady and sure. The bench and the buried acorn were behind him, but he carried their meaning with him. Back at the steps, Maurice paused and looked up at the marble building. He traced the carved letters over the door names of past leaders, founders of the town. He wondered what they would think of his story. I thought of the men and women who had built this place, who had stood for justice in their own days. He felt a current of strength flow into him, a reminder that history was shaped by small acts of courage. He climbed the steps and entered the lobby. The air smelled cool and clean. He walked past the banners still hanging from the windows and the echoes of applause that seemed to linger in the hall. For a moment, he felt a sense of peace, as if the building itself embraced him in quiet respect. He placed his hand on the polished railing and closed his eyes. He let the memory of that quiet peace fill him, push back the storm inside. A clerk at the desk looked up and offered a kind nod. Morris returned it with a slight smile. He stepped outside again, this time heading toward home. He moved with purpose now, each footfall firm on the pavement. He held his phone at his side, its buzzing no longer commanding his attention. He felt the weight of his uniform and medals shift from his chest to his shoulders like a familiar load he was ready to bear. At home, Maurice found his mother in the kitchen humming softly as she baked. The warm scent of biscuits filled the air. She looked up as he entered and rushed to hug him. Her arms wrapped around him like soft wings. He closed his eyes and leaned into her embrace, feeling the steady beat of her heart through her thin cotton shirt. She smelled of flower and lavender and love. Morris let himself cry then, tears of relief and sorrow mingling. His mother led him to the table and poured him a glass of iced tea, and he sat down and set his medals on a clean cloth. He picked one up and rubbed his thumb over its edge. His mother watched him with gentle eyes. "You did the right thing today," she said, quietly. Maurice nodded, but words failed him. He held her hand and let her calm fill the room. That night, Maurice lay awake in bed. The ceiling fan turned slowly above him, and the moon cast soft light through the window. He stared at the medals on his dresser, shining silver and bronze in the pale glow. He thought of Marcus and the stars, the acorn under the bench, his mother's embrace. He thought of the faces in the cafe and the faces online who had cried for him. He thought of Officer Connors and the hurt in his eyes too, and wondered, what pain drove Connors to cruelty? Maurice closed his eyes and whispered a prayer for healing for himself, for Connors, for the town he loved. He asked for strength to turn anger into action, shame into hope. He asked for guidance to speak with kindness and truth. He felt his heart slow, the storm inside growing quiet at last. As he drifted into sleep, he carried the small seed of hope. He had planted that day, ready to nurture it into something strong enough to stand against hate, something that could one day grow into a shelter for all who needed it. Maurice woke before dawn the next morning, heart heavy but mind clear. He could not ignore what had happened, felt a calling deep inside to speak not with anger, but with the truth of his own heart. He brewed a pot of coffee, its warm steam rising in gentle curls, then carried a cup outside onto his small porch. The sky was just lightening, a pale gray brushing the edge of night. He sat in his old wooden chair, cradling the mug between both hands. Each sip brought calm. He thought of the faces in the cafe, the look in Officer Connors' eyes, and the weight of his own chest as hatred had tried to crush him. Morris set the mug down and stepped back inside. He paced his neat living room a few steps, feeling the wood floor warm under his socks. Then he collected his phone and tripod and moved to a quiet corner by the window. The early light shone soft through the curtains. He set the tripod up so the camera faced him squarely. He paused in front of it and straightened his uniform, smoothing the creases. His medals glinted in the soft light. He took a deep breath, then pressed record. He spoke in a calm voice, careful and clear. "My name is Maurice Jenkins. I served as an Army sergeant for 6 years," he began. He sounded steady, but his voice shook slightly. "Yesterday, I came home to join my community. In honoring our veterans, I came for hope, for unity, and to remember those we lost." He paused and swallowed, eyes on the camera lens. He thought of Marcus, of childhood summers and his mother's baking. He held on to those memories to steady himself. "Ceremony. I went to a cafe to rest and have a cup of coffee," he said. His face was gentle, not angry. There an officer approached me and demanded to see my ID. I showed him my veteran card and my driver's license. He called me a liar. He spoke cruel words about my race. He yanked at my medals like they were cheap toys. Maurice's eyes glistened with tears. In that moment, I felt the weight of every insult I ever heard. I felt shame I did not deserve. I felt pain that cut deeper than any wound on the battlefield. He paused the recording and wiped a tear from his cheek. Then he smiled softly. "But I want you to know something," he said, pressing stop and starting again without cutting the video. "I refuse to let hate define who I am. Refuse to let cruelty break my spirit. My medals are more than metal. They are symbols of service, of sacrifice, of love for my country and for every person in it." He lifted a medal to the camera. "These medals remind me that hope is stronger than hate. They remind me that kindness is more powerful than cruelty." He took another deep breath. "I do not hate Officer Connors. I do not wish him harm. I only wish him understanding. I wish him the chance to see that we are all human, that each life matters, that respect is not a gift to be earned, but a right to be given." His voice sounded firm now, gentle but unwavering. "I ask everyone watching this to join me in asking one question. When will we honor every life equally? When will we stop judging each other by the color of our skin and start lifting each other up by the kindness in our hearts?" Maurice looked straight at the camera, his eyes warm and honest. "If you believe in justice, if you believe in unity, if you believe in love, please share this video. Let us turn pain into compassion. Let us turn shame into understanding. Let us build a community where every person feels valued and safe." He nodded once, a small, confident motion. Then he reached forward and tapped the stop button. His phone buzzed as the recording ended. He sat in the hush of his living room, listening to the faint sound of the street waking up outside. He felt a quiet strength settle in his chest. Had spoken his truth with no malice, only hope. He knew the video would spread. He knew people would weep at his words. He knew some would argue, some would judge him, yet he believed in the power of his message. Within minutes, notifications lit up his screen. The video had posted to his social account, and the views were climbing fast. Comments began to pour in. "Thank you for speaking with grace," one person wrote. "You are a true hero," another said. "This made me cry," posted someone else, and then it made me think. Morris scrolled slowly, reading each message. He felt tears again, but these were tears of relief and hope. An hour later, his phone rang. It was the local news station. A friendly reporter asked if he would come to the studio later for an interview. Maurice agreed. He felt a mixture of nerves and purpose. He pressed the phone gently against his ear. "Yes," he said. "I will be there." He spent the rest of the morning quietly. He helped his mother with the dishes, and they talked softly about flowers and gardens and life's simple joys. He walked his dog down the lane, feeling the earth firm under his feet. Every step he took reminded him that he belonged here, that he mattered, that his story could change hearts. That afternoon, Morris arrived at the little television studio. The host greeted him with respect and guided him to a seat under bright lights. When the cameras rolled, Morris felt calm, he repeated. His message, his voice strong and kind. He spoke of dignity, of unity, of healing. He spoke of the need for respect in every corner of the country. The host nodded and wiped away a tear on camera, moved by Morris's words. Back at home that evening, Morris sat on his porch again. The sky glowed pink with sunset. He sipped iced tea and watched fireflies blink among the flowers. His phone lay silent beside him for once. He felt a gentle peace. He had spoken from his heart. It had shown what true courage looked like, facing cruelty, not with more cruelty, but with compassion. Before the sky grew dark, Maurice leaned back and closed his eyes. He thought of that acorn he had planted under the bench in the park. He pictured its tiny sprout pushing through the soil, reaching for sunlight. He pictured his words taking root in people's hearts, growing into understanding and respect. He pictured a community where no veteran, no neighbor, no child would ever face shame for who they were. He opened his eyes and smiled. He felt hope glow inside him, steady and warm. He knew the road ahead might be long. He knew change did not come overnight, but he believed in that small seed of kindness he had planted, both under the bench and in his message to the world. He believed in his own heart, and in every heart that heard his words. As the first stars blinked in the twilight, Morris whispered, a quiet prayer of thanks, and he looked forward to the day when his simple act of truth would help heal his town, and maybe even his country. Maurice woke on a bright morning with a gentle hope in his heart. The video he had shared was still on his phone screen, but today he felt ready to step into the world and see what would happen next. He dressed in his uniform once more, pinning his medals carefully to his chest. He felt their weight, but did not feel shame. Instead, he felt pride in what they stood for. He drove slowly toward the town square, where a large crowd had gathered. Flags fluttered in the breeze, and the courthouse steps were draped with banners, reading unity and healing. Families, veterans, schoolteachers, shopkeepers, and even some police officers stood together. Morris parked at the edge of the square and stepped out. He felt a gentle warmth as people turned and smiled at him. Their eyes said, "Thank you for speaking your truth." At the foot of the courthouse, the mayor stood next to a long wooden table. She held a paper in her hand. Behind her, people had set up folding chairs in neat rows. A small stage had microphones. Ready. As Morris approached, the mayor smiled and nodded. "Thank you for coming, Sergeant Jenkins," she said softly. "Today is about listening, understanding, and taking steps forward together." Morris nodded back. He took a deep breath and stood by the table. The mayor began by thanking Maurice again for his courage. Then she looked out at the crowd. "We are here to heal as a community," she said. "We have invited leaders, veterans, neighbors, and yes, police officers to speak with us today. We will share our stories, our pain, and our hopes. We will move forward with real changes." The first to speak was an older veteran who had fought in a different war. His voice was low and steady. He spoke of his own moments of fear and how a simple kindness from a stranger had saved him from despair. The crowd listened in silence. When he finished, applause rose like a wave. Next, a teacher spoke. She told of children who felt afraid simply because of how they looked. She spoke of the fear that can grow in young hearts when they see unfairness. Parents wiped tears as she described holding a child's hand and saying, "You belong here." One by one, people came to the stage. Shopkeepers spoke of patients they had served in their stores. Friends spoke of times when they had failed to speak up. A local pastor read a short prayer for peace. A police chief, a veteran himself, spoke of the honor of wearing a badge and the need for humility. He said that bias training would begin next week for every officer. The crowd cheered softly, hope and relief mixing in their faces. At last, Maurice felt a gentle nudge from the mayor. It was his turn. He stepped forward, standing tall but humble. He looked at the faces before him, faces of every color, every age. He felt the strength of the oak tree under which he had planted the acorn. He felt the support of his mother's faith, of Marcus's memory, of every stranger who had messaged him. He spoke in a calm voice. "Thank you all for being here," he said. "Thank you for listening with open hearts. I came back to this town to honor my fellow veterans. I came hoping to celebrate service, sacrifice, and hope. Yesterday, I felt pain. I felt shame and shock. But today, standing here, I feel something stronger, unity." He paused and took a breath. No tears fell, but his eyes sparkled with unshed hope. "I want to offer forgiveness to the officer who wronged me," he said. "I do not know his pain, but I know hatred can hurt us all. Today I forgive him. But forgiveness alone is not enough. We need understanding. We need training. We need to listen to each other every day." He held up one hand to show his medals. "These medals remind me of service. They remind me of those who stood beside me and those who never came home. They remind me to stand for everyone's dignity. Let us wear respect like a medal. Let's practice kindness like a drill. Let us build a town where no one fears humiliation because of their skin or their name." The crowd was silent, moved by his gentle power. When he finished, people rose to their feet and applauded. The applause was long and soft, filled with tears and smiles. Morris stepped down from the stage and neighbors flocked around him. They shook his hand, hugged him, offered thanks. After the speeches, the mayor invited everyone to join small circles on the lawn. Men and women sat in groups of 8 or 10. Each group had a facilitator who guided them to share a personal story of hurt or hope. Maurice joined a circle that included a retired teacher, a young police officer who had volunteered for the bias training, shopkeeper whose neighbor was a veteran, and a mother whose child was friends with Morris's niece. They spoke quietly, their voices gentle but clear. The teacher spoke of feeling guilty for not standing up when she heard someone use a cruel word. The young officer spoke of his promise to do better, to listen. The shopkeeper spoke of the day Maurice had bought extra food for a family in need. The mother spoke of her child who came home crying after hearing an insult on the playground. And Morris spoke of the moment his medals were yanked, of the fear and of the healing he felt that morning. When each finished, the group offered a moment of silence. Then they held hands, a circle of support under the shade of a great oak. Maurice felt tears fall, but these were tears of relief and faith. He saw in their eyes a kindness that broke down walls. He saw in their hearts a promise of change. Later, as the crowd broke into smaller action teams, Morris joined the group, forming a veteran support program. They planned monthly meetings where veterans could share their stories safely. The group also decided to work with local schools to teach children about respect and unity. Another team volunteered to help the police department set up bias training sessions and community patrol walks where officers and neighbors could talk informally. Maurice felt a surge of excitement. He saw how small steps, taken by many people, could create real change. He remembered the acorn under the park bench. He thought of how a tiny seed could grow into a mighty tree. Today he saw the tiny seed of his video planting itself in the hearts of his neighbors. Ready to grow? As the sun dipped low, the mayor invited everyone for a simple meal under long tables covered with white cloths. Platters of homemade bread, fresh fruit, and roasted chicken lined the tables. People sat side by side, veterans next to officers, children next to elders. They laughed, they chatted, they broke bread together. Morris sat between the town librarian and a nurse. They spoke softly about books and flower gardens and the beauty of simple moments. That evening, as the sky turned violet, the mayor raised a glass of lemonade. She asked for one more moment of attention. Today we have listened, we have shared, and we have planned. We have taken the first steps on a long journey toward understanding. Let us continue this path every day with kindness. She lifted her glass. To unity and healing, she said. To respect and justice. The crowd echoed her words. To unity, to healing, to respect, to justice. They drank, and the sound swelled into a harmony of hope. Morris looked around and felt warmth glow inside him. The fear of yesterday had given way to a gentle fire of purpose. He watched children run to the edge of the tables, grabbing sweet fruit, their laughter bright in the gathering dusk. He saw officers chatting with elders, smiles on their faces. He saw veterans leaning on each other, sharing silent nods of understanding. As the meal ended and people began to drift away, Morris stayed where he was. He let the moment fill him. The oak tree overhead looked down on him like a guardian. He whispered a quiet thanks to his mother, to Marcus, to every stranger who had shown kindness, to every neighbor who had listened. When at last he arose and walked home under the first stars, Morris carried with him a simple truth. Change was possible when people dared to speak with open hearts. When they forgave but did not forget, when they planted seeds of hope and nurtured them with action, in the days and weeks that followed, the new training began. The veteran meetings took shape, and the school lessons brought fresh understanding. The acorn sprouted into a small shoot beneath the oak in the park. Morris watched it grow each morning as he passed on his way to lead the veteran group. The little green sprout reached bravely toward the sun just as his town, once shaken by cruelty, reached toward a brighter tomorrow.